I think it's time to move on to the Iowa team that took down K-State men's basketball in the
Yeah,
NIT. And who did Jerome Tang say
yeah.
is the basically this men's team version of Caitlin Clark, the guy that torched them?
Uh
I wrote his name down earlier and I forgot it already.
huh. Yeah, no, I think that was a solid
Peyton
comparison.
Sandford.
Yeah,
I think they
that
wear the
was
same number and everything. So
yeah. They was like, we're gonna treat this guy like Caitlin Clark. You know, he's a sniper anywhere on the court, and unfortunately, they didn't execute that game plan the way that they wanted to, and they at home, just like K State women's
yeah,
basketball team.
it was in Iowa. Which I mean, that's the thing. You have to factor in there. I mean, that crowded Iowa wasn't going to be easy to play in front of, even though it wasn't as packed as what Caitlin Clark's been doing with that arena this year and last year. But it's still disappointing. It's been a disappointing K-State season, and I could give you every excuse under the sun.
Valid.
I mean, there's some
Yeah.
valid excuses there. I mean, losing Naquan Tomlin to the transfer portal mid-season. And he goes and balls out at Memphis. Memphis missed the tournament as well, though. So it's not like he elevated Memphis, but I do believe to where they would have made a tournament. But I do believe he would have elevated K-State. I think he was going to be K-State men's basketball, their best player.
Yeah.
Along with Tyler Perry, Arthur Kaluma. I think what Naquan Tomlin brought was a level of length, athleticism that no one else had on the team, and still, add in the skill that he possessed as well. He didn't get to play 1 minute this year at K-State, and that definitely affected the season. And then you also talk about Quez Glover. He was a guy that also didn't get to play 1 minute for different reasons. He was just injured all year. He was a guy that was a transfer in who was probably going to be the starting point guard and let Tyler Perry play off the ball more, which is more Tyler Perry's strength.
And Jerome Tang, he talked about the losses of those two players in the press conference and how that kind of did have an effect on the locker room. He was like, yeah, these guys went through a lot. They lost, two of their teammates. And then he talked to the reporters. He was like, I don't know if you all lost anybody, but, it can be difficult to deal with, trying to put things into perspective of how much of a mental load that was on his players. But Jerome Tang, you know how he is, man. Very, very optimistic, very positive, and understands the bigger picture of his purpose of being a coach, teaching these guys how to deal with adversity, teaching them how to bounce back and overcome certain challenges. And it looks like he did really a good job of making sure that the players kept their head up even after those unfortunate losses and inconsistency of play throughout the season.
I think Jerome Tang, I'm always going to love Jerome Tang. Got to cover him extensively last year in a magical season.
Yes.
Where they went to the Elite Eight in his first season. Jerome Tang wins a National Coach of the Year. He's got a guy named Marquise Noel on his team who just embodies everything K-State is, toughness and grit and just so much skill. And then had Keontae Johnson with the heart story where he almost died on the court at Florida the couple of years before that. Comes in and was a huge piece to that team as well, arguably their best player. Obviously, Marquise Noel would have something to say about that, but Keontae Johnson was he was definitely not a 2. He was a 1B kind of guy, 1A, 1B kind of guy instead of a second guy. He was a stud. And then had Naquan Tomlin there as a third option, and Desi Sills. That team was stout and fun to watch. And it was a first year. Jerome Tang had to scrounge that team up out of nowhere from the transfer portal. And he made it happen. And everyone loved Jerome Tang after that first season. And even I will say, speaking for most K-State fans, I don't know any K-State fan that has started to really doubt him at this point. I mean, after one disappointing season,
especially with the circumstances.
Guys that couldn't play. Yeah, I mean, it was going to be tough regardless for this Wildcat team.
Oh yeah,
and I will say though, he's always been unbashful. He has not changed one bit. But he was way more well taken from national media standpoint and from an outsider perspective, non-K-Stater standpoint last year. But now with this year, you look at the losses that did pile up that made him miss an NCAA tournament. Although 9 wins, they had 9 wins total if you count the 1 win they had in the Big 12 tournament. 9 Big 12 wins, that gets you into the tournament most every year. Every year Bruce Weber was a K-State head coach, 9 wins was guaranteed you're in the NCAA tournament. It just was a fact of the matter. This year, things were just a little different. I think K-State lost to some teams that they really shouldn't have. I think they dropped one to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State was pretty poor this year. And those are just kinds of losses that you can't take and then expect to get into the tournament. But
Jerome Tang, he said like he thought 9 wins, just like you just said, was going to be good enough to make the tournament. But he was like, well, maybe we got to start, trying to get 11 or something. Like he alluded to that in his presser, after that loss in the NIT tournament, and you brought that up, them missing out on the NCAA tournament and having to play in NIT. Do you think that kind of discouraged some of the players in that locker room? Now I know Jerome Tang and the coaching staff did their best, to put it into perspective. Listen, we all get another chance to play. That was his big thing after the game that he told reporters, that he told the group of guys in the locker room. But do you think just off of the eye test of what you saw on the floor in the NIT tournament, some of the mistakes? I know there was a inbounding play.
Dorian Finister who.
That
he got it inbounded to him, and mental lapse. Thought, I'm supposed to inbound it, and he jumped out of bounds, and it was a turnover. I mean, listen,
they were down 12 at that point.
No way to sugarcoat that
tournament.
Yep.
So maybe they were. I think they may have been a little bit discouraged. Possibly human nature, right? Trying to do their best to stay positive, stay in the moment, and try to make a deep run in the NIT tournament. But then when you're down 12 and stuff seems, the game plan isn't working, maybe they got down on themselves a little bit, like, the heck with it.
I can see it. I think that's the thing. The NIT is like it's a consolation bracket, basically. You don't get into the big dance. Here's the little dance. So I think you're right. I think had they actually gotten into the NCAA tournament, maybe we see some more fight. Or maybe even with the NIT tournament, they also got a lower seed than they were probably expecting. They probably thought they would get to host a game in the NIT tournament. That didn't happen, obviously. They had to go to Iowa in the first game of NIT. That's another discouraging thing. Had they been playing in front of their home fans? Because clearly Iowa wasn't discouraged. They were rocking and rolling. I will say, I don't know what was the right thing as far as the referees in that game. But at halftime, Iowa had shot 21 free throws compared to Kansas State's 3 free throws. That's a discrepancy that is just a little off to me. A little off. Makes you wonder. Sure, I think plenty of K-State fans do believe that K-State just didn't play with enough effort. We're grabbing people.
Or aggressive, trying to go to the hole.
And that's another reason. So I think you're probably on point. Like, I think it's a mixture of discouragement and maybe the refs could have called a little bit better game, but I don't think that played much of a part. I think it probably was more than anything discouraged, not wanting to even be in that spot, but just kind of there because they know their coach wants them to be there. And we come from a K-State family, one of the best K-State basketball players of all time, Jacob Pullen, rejected the NIT. He, obviously, once he said that, Once he said that, once he was asked, hey, would you accept an NIT invitation? Middle of the season, he was asked that because K-State wasn't playing very well. He said, heck no, I wouldn't do that. There's no way I would go play in the NIT. They went on to go off and win a bunch of games and get into the NCAA tournament. So I think he used it as fuel to make sure they won. They didn't even
during Jacob Poland's
time at K-State.
Wow,
exactly. Mid-season.
So he probably used that as a little bit.
He
used that as some motivation, fuel to especially as a leader of that squad. Like, heck no, we're not going into the
NBA. Exactly.
Yeah, and Jerome Tang talked about that as well. Because some teams did deny going to the tournament after being invited.
Yep.
So that just goes to show,
happens every year.
Yeah, that just goes to show that people don't really value the NIT tournament, or may view it as a waste of time, especially if their main outcome goal was to make it to the NCAA tournament and make a run there. So
silver lining for that NIT game.
Okay.
He played the freshman a bunch in that game.
Okay.
We even saw Buddy Rich play a lot, who did not play a lot this season at all. And RJ Jones played a little bit throughout the season, but not a ton. Day-Day Ames played a bunch this season, but he played probably more than any other, or maybe just a few other games where he played more than he did in the NIT. And that's a positive. Okay. Give them as many reps. You almost wish you could have won that game so you can continue giving those freshmen repetitions that will only help them in the future at K-State.
Most definitely.
As long as they don't transfer away anytime soon, which I don't think they will. They chose Jerome Tang out of high school. So these guys, I think they're going to stick together. They're skilled dudes.
Yeah.
But other guys have left.
Yeah.
We got Cam Carter entered the transfer portal.
Yes.
That's the biggest one so far, as far as I know, that has entered the transfer portal. Dorian Finister, who he's struggled. I think he was a guy that they kind of took, from the Louisiana area and out of high school as a guy they knew they could go get, and he's athletic and could do some things here and there, but he just he wasn't quite the power conference type of player, high major type of player that you want on a Kansas State basketball team. So I'm not too surprised he's decided to transfer away, go get some more minutes, probably at a mid-major type of program. Cam Carter's going to have a chance after this season where he scored like 15 points per game.
Yeah.
He's going to have a chance to go play many minutes at probably another high major program somewhere else.
Huge blow, man. He played pretty well to me. Would have loved to see him, stay at K-State. But, things happen. Who knows what was going on behind the scenes. It could just be as simple. He feels like he could have made an impact elsewhere.
Biggest knock of him was his turnovers. He did turn the ball over a lot this year, but he still took a huge step from last year to this year with his scoring ability, and I think that was key for K-State to get the wins that they did get this season.
How did we just find out that he was entering the transfer portal? Was it rumblings that's what he was going to do? Because it seemed the season just ended. Hopefully
there was rumblings. There was for sure rumblings.
Hopefully
it wasn't totally unexpected.
Hopefully it wasn't a premature decision, and if so, that stems from just frustration of how the season.
Yeah,
ended.
No.
That's why I had to ask. But
it's a good question.
I'm confident in Jerome Tang, that coaching staff, the recruitment that they're going to do this summer. Hopefully, we land some pretty good guys who will help us, avoid playing in the NIT tournament, and where we make the NCAA tournament again next year. So.
And people can get off that aren't K-State fans can get off Jerome Tang's back about there's things that Like, listen, I didn't love seeing him grab that thing from the girl and start wiping the floor. I didn't love that either.
Yeah.
But then again, that's just the passion that, Jerome Tang has. And it was, and it looks worse when you're losing. Had they won that game, I think that gets celebrated probably, not by Iowa State fans who wanted to hate on that a lot. It was during the Iowa State K-State basketball game, and I understand it from the perspective too. It's a woman wiping the floor, so a lot of people want to make that point about it, and I understand that part. But I do believe Jerome Tang would have done that, man or woman. He just wanted to make sure that part of the floor got
right. It could have been a little frustrated.
It was frustrated, exactly.
Depending on how you look at it, or we know the type of guy Jerome Tang is. Maybe he genuinely wanted to help out.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I don't think he did it with malice. Actually, in fact, I know for a fact he didn't do it with malicious intent, thinking, "Oh wow, I'm mansplaining this woman," basically by it's just. I don't know. There was, and then I will say there's a few other things that he said that I understand we're people, but as a K-State fan, you're going to back up your coach.
What did he say?
He called Tamin Lipsey the biggest flopper. He said Tyler Perry is the second biggest flopper in the Big 12. Tamin Lipsey, who is Iowa State point guard, is the biggest flopper in the Big 12. He mentioned that. I think I
gotta go back and look that up and hear his tone of voice and see how exactly he's.
And then, of course, there's also it's a few things with Iowa State. It seems like all of them come back to Iowa State because earlier in the season, he was accusing someone from behind the K-State bench at Iowa State Hilton Coliseum in Ames, Iowa, during that game up there, was filming. He was accusing someone of filming the huddle, the timeout huddle area, and
y'all doing that up there, Iowa State.
And TJ Otzelberger did not like that. The head coach for Iowa State, he kind of took offense to that, and it turned into a little beef, I think, between those two. And then you got to talk about as well Bill Self saying that Jerome Tang was coming through the handshake line in Lawrence without stopping and handshaking. He blew through the handshake line. It's like, come on, where are we gonna? I can't believe Bill Self even called that out. I don't know. I thought Bill Self was bigger than that. I mean, because you go back and look at when K-State beat on KU in Manhattan. That this year, it was the same thing. Bill Self went right through that handshake line and looked like about as fast as Jerome Tang did. I think the one thing that he didn't do, that Jerome Tang didn't do, that he did in Manhattan, and shout out to Curtis Townsend, longtime assistant coach with Kansas. Curtis Townsend and Jerome Tang stopped and really spoke with one another for a good 5 seconds, in the handshake line in Manhattan. There's a little video of him Jerome Tang going through that handshake line real quick, and Curtis Townsend kind of turned around like, "Oh man, I thought I was gonna get another
hey man, listen.
It's all love type thing." Listen,
man,
Jerome Tang is competitive. He doesn't want to mess around. He wants to go get wins. I mean,
they're looking for something to be wrong with him because what do we
I couldn't believe
see from him? You know what I'm saying? He's
exactly.
giving all glory to God. You know what I'm saying? That's what he stands for. But you can still do that and still be competitive.
Yep.
As long as he's showing that sportsmanship, no matter how quick he's going through shaking your hand. There's nothing wrong with that. If he would have just avoided shaking hands altogether, that's a different story. But I think people are just trying to find something wrong with the guy.
I think being competitive. You know what? At the end of the day, he's always positive about his team when it comes down to it. He says at the end of the loss with the NIT, he says, and instead of really blaming his team and this, that, and the other, he says, I'm building men. I'm making sure these kids that are coming through my system turn out to be strong men. That's his most important thing, is make sure they're good husbands to their wives in the future, good fathers to their kids in the future.
Yes.
That's his bigger goal than actually winning championships. It simply is.
That's very important.
Whereas, Bill Self probably has a different mindset. He probably wants to win championships over giving a damn about the kid that's on his roster. I think he cares somewhat, but also not to the extent that Jerome Tang does.
Yeah. or maybe
And I think Bill's.
It differently.
That's a good point. And I will say it sounds like I'm taking a shot at Bill Self, and maybe I am, but I actually like Bill Self. I actually do like Bill Self. I've covered him extensively too. When covering K-State, I've been around him. He's actually a genuinely good guy, from what I can tell. But he communicates differently than Jerome Tang does, in a way where Bill Self, after the loss in the second round of the NCAA tournament, instead of saying, you know what, all things considered, this was a solid season for us, and maybe he did say that at some point in his spiel, but the biggest headline coming out of that post-game press conference was him saying, I've been looking towards the next season for a month now.
Yeah.
I mean, if that doesn't kind of sting you if you're on that roster more than anything else. And he finished the quote off by saying something like along the lines of, we just didn't have enough firepower this year. That's another stinger.
Yeah.
That's another stinger if you're on that roster.
Yeah.
And I'll say it, kind of like the Naquan Tomlin thing, but also very different circumstances, where Arterio Morris was kicked off the team before the season even started for real deal allegations that are severe, reasons that Arterio Morris will probably never see a basketball floor again at the collegiate or professional, at least NBA level. Yeah. We're talking about serious rape allegations. Yeah. I mean, it's just that affected their team, I think. Had they not picked up him and then had to let him go, maybe they did their homework and understood and gotten, some of the reports back of what he did before, the real hearings began and the sentencing began and whatnot. And him making another mistake, I believe, that he made, allegedly, then maybe they go after someone who does have the firepower to go make something happen.
I don't know. It's a tough one. But, Bill Self has coached at Kansas for, 21 years, and he has a pretty good feel of, what it takes to make that make a deep NCAA tournament run. So I can see I can understand both sides. I can understand where Bill Self was coming from, saying like how he was looking ahead and everything like that. And I can understand people who may have took offense to that, or the players in the locker room specifically, if they took offense to that. But you know what? He's a goal-driven guy. Two-time champion, two-time NCAA championship head coach there. Correct me if I know KU fans probably gonna see this and no,
I think that's right. You got one with Mario Chalmers, and you got this last one 2 years ago.
Yep, 2 years ago with what was it? Grady Dick and
well, no, that was because that was Grady Dick. Was that 2 years? No, they had Grady Dick last year as a freshman. The year that they won it all was with Ochai was on the team. Christian Brown was on the team. Who's Denver Nugget now. Who else was on that squad? Oh yeah, Jalen Wilson was their leading scorer.
Gotcha.
Jalen Wilson, Ochai Agbaji, and Christian Brown were like their best three players, and they still had KJ Adams, who really did some stuff for them, even as a freshman, I believe he was at that time.
Yeah, so 2022.
Yeah, because Grady Dick was a freshman last year, and they didn't win it all.
Yep. You're right.
And then he won and done it. I will say, Grady Dick came back to this team this year. That was kind of what they were missing. Mm-hmm. That Jayhawks team was a sharpshooter, and that's what Grady Dick really was. He did a lot of things well, but he really could shoot the heck out of the basketball, and they missed someone like that. They had every other piece with Kevin McCullough, who fortunately for the Jayhawks got injured for the tournament. Mm-hmm. Hunter Dickinson, who's arguably been one of the best centers for the past 2-3 years. And then DeJuan Harris, who I think is underrated. I think he's a really solid player.
He is pretty solid. And yeah, okay. I think I was confusing Grady with Christian Braun, who
Yep.
now is a NBA
Yep.
champion and
Pronounced
plays for
Brown.
Brown. Sorry,
So I pronounce it Braun too. So
plays for the
Denver Nuggets.
Denver Nuggets. So he's a reigning champion with them, and from Overland Park, Kansas. Went to Blue Valley Northwest High School.
Yep. K-State wanted him too.
Yeah, and of course, Abachi is still doing in the NBA. Performing really well. But again, just going back, Bill Self, I think he understands, what it takes. Yeah, it probably didn't come off, the best, especially, after a loss, when you have to answer these reporters. But again, I don't hold it against them. So yeah, we'll see how things, shake up for KU moving into the future.